hello, and welcome to the Common Geeking Program. We are a book club style podcast where each episode we discuss a different topic from our own geeky and nerdy perspectives. I am your host, Jeff Levitt, and this week we are going to be taking a look at Spider-Man No Way Home. I almost said Spider-Way No Man Home or something like that.
No man.
And this time around,
that's basically that's what I say whenever I encounter a bug. This is the spider way. There is no man home because I'm leaving.
Or alternatively, Spider Way. No, wait, that's what I said the first time. Spider
Sponderbomb.
Spider no. Spider no man way home.
Spider home? No way, man.
I like Spider no man way home personally, but anyway, I'm joined this time around.
Well, Manway is the first and mightiest of the Valar.
This time I'm joined by two of my fellow nerds who can introduce themselves. Who have I been hearing?
Hi, my name is Colin Ketchin. Big fan of the Spider-Man, not a fan of spiders, and I had too much dessert, so I'm drinking water to sort of get my head back in the game. I am struggling through some cookies.
Are you a fan of home?
I'd never leave it, so I must be.
And are you a fan of The Way?
I mean, as a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm very familiar with the meme that you are trying to get me to say, whether you know it or not.
I know it. And who else?
Hi. You may look at me and just think I'm just your average run-of-the-mill guy. Hey, not a care in the world.
Motherfucker. God,
you'd be wrong.
What?
This is my burden. I am Chowder.
Nobody could know that my real name is Taeemul Chowdhury, so I
Who
must
could
be
have thought
Chowder
it? See,
forevermore.
Chowder is really one of those Danny Fenton type superheroes who's like, oh, my real name is Danny Fenton and my superhero name is Danny Phantom. And I look exactly the same, except I have white hair, but my parents can't recognize me.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they know their son is alive, so why would they think their son is dead?
Okay, but that's like...
Well, Danny Phantom's parents did deal... his parents did deal with ghosts a lot, though, so they should be, like, pretty primed to do that. That'd be like if you guest starred in Star Trek and I didn't notice you. Like, if Jeff didn't notice, sure, he's probably not thinking about Star Trek. I would be like, Chowder, why didn't you tell me this?
No, what it would really be like is, like, if Colin saw one of us in Star Trek and he went, well, I know Jeff's not in Star Trek, so this must be a completely different person with no relationship, even though he looks and sounds exactly like him. And I'm also not going to bring up the fact that they look and sound exactly like each other. As far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at a total stranger because I've already been introduced to the information that Jeff is not in Star Trek. All right.
Yeah. Well, thematically, the movie we're discussing really does sort of torpedo the whole whichever you prefer when it comes to which identity we're talking about.
All right, guys. We are going to start off by summarizing and discussing our topic, and then we're going to end off with our little rating section where we decide if the movie was worthwhile and enjoyable. All right. Yeah.
Are we just jumping right in? Going in cold?
To get on into the summary.
So hold on. Let's say this. Hold on. First of all,
predeterminates.
Spoilers
for sure.
No,
big,
just big, gigantic fucking spoilers. If you have not seen Spider Home No Way Man, we are going to discuss the intimate details of this film. One of the few very spoilable films out there. If you care about such a thing. I'm actually texting a friend of mine right now, and she and her husband went to go see the movie, and she's like, I didn't know anything about it, and I had such a good time. My husband, and I know this guy, really nice guy, chill, smart, great, love this dude. Went up on Reddit, looking at trailers, watching interviews, and reading posts about it voluntarily, like, before going to see the movie.
Some people are, like, impervious to spoilers. Like, I know I was talking.
But even so, why would you what's the point of watching the movie if you're just gonna read it first? I was talking if you have some incredible Spider-Man related anxiety.
I was talking to my grandma, and she was talking about how she reads up on the plots of her like mystery shows to decide if that would be an episode that she would like or not before she watches it. I'm like, it's a mystery.
Yeah, okay. That's it. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, there are some things that are just inherently meant to be like seen in a linear fashion.
I mean, to be fair, and we'll get into this a bit. Everything like that in Spider-Man, I think, is all like for the spectacle, you know? Because like even all of us who hadn't had it spoiled kind of knew that these things were happening anyway.
But if you're going to see it, in the theaters, you're inherently buying into the spectacle. If they watch this in 2 years on fucking Super Sony Plus Max, whenever that comes out,
sometimes
then I
you
get
just
it.
like to...
But you're going to see it in the theaters.
Actually, interesting question.
In the theaters during a gigantic wave of the pandemic, when you have a small child, and like... You're clearly trying to engage with it on that level, and you're just like, I'm just gonna read it all first. It's
strange to me too. I'm just saying it's not unheard of.
I mean, for some people, like the idea of like spoilers aren't really like a big deal for them. It's more about the execution of the idea, I guess. So.
Right? Yeah.
I understand that, but even putting spoilers aside, I think like being surprised, like not like, oh, you ruined the movie. Like spoilers implies that a movie can be ruined. And honestly, all the spoilers we're going to discuss in this movie, I don't really think they're spoilers. But going in and not knowing the things, it's still nice.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't know why you would seek that out ahead of time.
Okay, so fucking... We already said big spoilers, so what I'm about to say is again a spoiler that we haven't talked about yet. But I was with my girlfriend and her siblings in their mom's living room, and Michaela, my girlfriend, hasn't seen it yet, but both of her siblings had, and they were like talking about it, and Michaela was like, "Wait, I haven't seen it. Don't say anything."
Oh, no.
And then her sister starts talking about how TM shows up in it, and Michaela's like, "You think I don't know what that means?" And she's like, "Stop saying anything. I don't want to hear it." And then there's like a second of silence, and then her sister turns to her brother and goes, "TM." I was like, "Yeah, no shit, motherfucker, shut up."
Don't you go citing the old law. I was there when it was written.
Christ.
This is yet another movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, it is still in that same continuity. We're picking up pretty much right after Spider-Man.
Literally during the post-credit sequence of Spider-Man.
Yeah, right. Home. Which, I mean, I guess, we don't know how much distance was between the end of that movie proper and the post-credits. I would think at least some time, right?
No. The end of the movie and the post credits, it was literally like a cut. Like they're swinging around the city, and then Spider-Man puts MJ down, and she's like, "I never want to do that again." And then bam, J.K. Simmons pops up on the screen. Like it is, and they say in this movie, it's literally, yeah, we're going to swat the hell out of you. And even in No Way Home, they do say that this movie's beginning incidents take place 1 week after the showdown with Mysterio
in London.
Is
very
fresh.
It's
very, very immediate.
So basically the same thing that happened in the post-credits. Peter Parker gets doxxed, he gets revealed to the world, and then they basically have this sort of this ensuing drama where like people are saying that he murdered Mysterio because like Mysterio selectively clipped together clips of Peter saying like, "Oh, execute all of them," when he was talking about destroying the drones and stuff like that. So he's making him look like a real bad guy fucking in his grave.
Yeah. And they did something with Mysterio that they've been doing a lot in the MCU stuff, especially on Disney Plus, which is like really trying to make all the big villain things be polarizing incidents in the way everything is in American culture right now. Like Thanos was right, Mysterio is right. Like all that keeps happening all over the place, and I like it.
That scene in Hawkeye where he's like looking at like the urinal that had Thanos was right. Like it's played so seriously, but it was just funny to me.
Yeah.
Just like
It was funny, but if you want to engage with the seriousness, like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, set that sentiment up pretty clearly and explicitly. So I think that it's like in these it's executed simply, but it's playing on the strengths of the MCU in a pretty.
And it's also funny how they've I don't think this is properly revealed, I guess if you want to call it a reveal till later, but the version of the Daily Bugle in the MCU is like basically like an Alex Jones type podcast of like conspiracy theories, which is
big InfoWars
which is pretty
energy.
Funny. I mean, it's probably doing
when they revealed that at the end of Far From Home, I was like, this is the perfect adaptation
it's
of this
probably
character.
Doing a bit of a disservice, I think, to J. Jonah Jameson in the comics, but it fits.
Yeah, but we already got that. We already got those movies. We don't need that again.
The actual J. Jonah Jameson, like in the comics and stuff, while he may be like, a dick to Spider-Man, overall he's like a news reporter of integrity. Yeah. So here,
fun thing. Later in this movie, it starts off with J. Jonah Jameson being displayed as sort of like a grimy opportunist. You see him on like a green screen in like a messy basement, and he's just like making a big stink out of this. But as the movie goes on, we do get to see he has like a message that is not strictly divisive, which I thought was nice and didn't totally let the character slip into farce.
You can't really go back. Like when you make him like Alex Jones, know, oh yeah, what if he's, got like a little more depth? Alex Jones is comically evil.
Yeah.
And you can't really go back from that.
I respect that interpretation. So the opening bit of this movie is a fun bit of business because it's just a very kind of farcical slapstick, like one shot as they're May and Happy are breaking up as MJ and Peter sneak in.
Yeah, like the beginning of the movie, it's like just Spider-Man and MJ trying to just get away from all the people who are hounding them now that the secret's out, and they end up going back to Peter Parker's apartment where Colin was describing MJ, or not MJ, May and Happy breaking up. Yeah.
So I mean, I was kind of surprised at how this movie started because we'd all been like conditioned for this spectacle that brings a bunch of different Spider-Man movies together. But like, then we immediately start with this very intimate, goofy bit of just people screaming, "Are you going to have his spider babies?" as they like tumble through the apartment and everything. I thought that whole beginning montage just kind of really made me laugh. The debriefing by the FBI, them going back to school. I don't know. It felt very much like the tone of Spider-Man Homecoming. And I was surprised that they held on to that from the rip. I was like expecting it to dive in, and they immediately tell us we're not going to worry about Peter's legal troubles because one special lawyer shows up to say he's fine.
Yeah. Which is also, I do appreciate that Aunt May and Happy broke up because like in the first two, like in Homecoming and Far From Home, the entirety of Aunt May's character is basically, ha ha ha, she's young and sexy. Yeah. Aunt May can get it. La mow.
Yeah, but, pretty much.
In this movie, they actually give her a character, so that's nice.
Yeah, no, it's a strong turn by Marissa Tomei, but another strong turn by Charlie Cox.
As Colin was alluding to, we get revealed in a very, this is incredibly intentional because there's a lot of speculation about whether or not Charlie Cox as Daredevil / Matt Murdock was going to show up in this, and there's just a quick shot where it's just Kane hits the ground, boom, his face, and there's no big reveal. It's a big reveal in its own way, but it's very boom, right out there. It's just yes, he's here.
I've seen this movie twice in theaters. The first time I saw it was an IMAX preview. IMAX previews I like to go to, especially during COVID, because they're usually so empty. Not this one. And holy crap, the eruption of noise when his face showed up on the screen. I saw it with my partner who has not watched the Daredevil show, and she's like, why is everyone happy? I'm like, just trust me, it's good. Just trust me. It's very, very good that Daredevil's back.
Yeah, no, my sister
but that's it. That's all he was in, and I think that's all they needed to do. That was just Kevin Feige saying, shut up, We got him.
Also,
Enjoy
I
your
fucking
movie.
I
And then we move
adored
on.
the bit where like some crazy person throws a brick through their window, and Matt Murdock, the blind lawyer, just turns back and catches the brick in midair, and they're all looking at him like, "What the fuck? How did you do that?" And he's just like, "I'm a very good lawyer."
I'm a really good lawyer.
Which is
yeah,
just...
that made me laugh. So
Yeah.
here we get thrust into the plot proper, where Peter is dealing with the fallout of being ID'd as Spider-Man. He and his friends are getting a lot of flack, and they get denied entry to MIT because
and
of the
every other school they
controversy.
apply to.
So he asked Doctor Strange.
I'm just saying, lots of people don't get into MIT,
But it was explicitly because of the controversy. Like they made sure to tell us that there no ambiguity in this story, and so he approaches Doctor Strange and says, "Hey, can I just make everyone forget that I'm Spider-Man?"
No. He's talks to Doctor Strange. Is like, is there a way you can go back in time and make it so I never get revealed? And Doctor Strange is like,
"Oh yeah,
I don't have the time stone anymore. And even then, that would be bad." And like Wong is like, "Hey, yeah, too bad you can't make him forget." And he's like, "Wait, I bet. Here's an idea. What if we just made everyone forget?" Wong's like, "No, don't do it." And Strange is like, "Come on, man." And he's like,
So my favorite bit of MCU stuff here, and this is another moment that like totally flew under the radar but can we talk about the fact that Doctor Strange is not the Sorcerer Supreme?
Yeah.
Wong is?
yeah, no, I love that. That's a great touch.
That took my breath away. I really enjoyed this, like the fucking bureaucracy of the blip, making it so that, oh no, this is not. Doctor
And
Strange
good,
is not
honestly,
important.
that fucking Wong is the one who's in charge, since he'd been studying there for God knows how long or whatever, and then this white dude just shows up and then suddenly becomes the boss. Like, fuck you.
But also, Wong's authority is immediately undercut because he's standing up for the rules, just as he did in Doctor Strange, and then immediately says, "All right, you can do it. Just leave me out of it." And then
because they're bugs.
This has to be intentional at this point. It has to be just an intentional running joke that Wong is just like, "Fuck this, I'm out of here." Yeah. The multiverse is collapsing. Y'all hear something? Not me. Fuck y'all.
The two instances we saw of him in Shang-Chi were fighting Abomination and walking into an Asian restaurant calling out Shang-Chi's name like he is actually a busboy or something, or
Well, because, not to get back to Shang-Chi, but, like, it was implied, right, that the fight with him and Abomination was, like, he was, like, training him, right? Because then he talks to...
It was implied, but he was also having a lot of fun.
I know,
but also then there's Infinity War where like, the whole Thanos thing is going down, and Wong's like, "I can't. Sanctum's unguarded," and then fucks right off.
Yeah.
He's
got to protect that sanctum.
And
that's true.
And that's not me complaining. I love that about his character. Just like, y'all hear something?
Yeah. He contains multitudes. It's kind of like Wong is turning... For me, Wong is sort of turning into like this phase's Phil Coulson. The fun of Phil Coulson in the early movies is like, who the fuck is this guy? And then by the time we finally get to know a little more about him, he gets knifed in the back. And right now, I'm just like, what the fuck is Wong doing? He's the Sorcerer Supreme and he's going to underground boxing matches in China? What the fuck?
He's got some... He's like... I like the underground boxing thing because if he's like training him, he's basically like rehabilitating this guy, right? So he's like, it's kind of like, being like, oh yeah, the sorcerer like fucking organization doesn't just like sit back and do nothing. Like they do, rehabilitation and humanitarian work in some form at least, right? Like it makes it feel more present.
It is at least a stark contrast. It is at least a contrast between his leadership and that of Tilda Swinton, which was basically just sit back and let people go crazy. He's at least like, let me train up all these fishmen so that we have a super army for Thanos too. So the spell goes wrong because Doctor Strange implies, and I thought the trailer gave away too much. The trailers gave away too much about this spell casting, but when we actually got into the spell, I didn't I guess I didn't totally get from the trailers. Maybe I'm just stupid that even Doctor Strange and the Avengers were going to forget him. And that was like dropped and kind of the inciting incident as to why Peter interrupts the spell for people to forget he's Spider-Man, is that he wants Doctor Strange to remember. He wants Happy to remember, May to remember.
Like Doctor Strange just dove right in without like telling Peter of the ramifications of this spell, and it's just like,
yeah, it did feel a little shisty. Like, hey, sign here, and I'll make you rich beyond your wildest dreams.
It felt
that's kind of what it felt like to me a little bit.
That was like one instance of like, okay, that's kind of lazy writing, right? Because like, because like he wouldn't have done that. Like it felt natural in the moment as like an order of an events, but then you like think back and you're like, well, would he have just started casting the spell without explaining to him that his girlfriend wouldn't remember him? Like, you're talking to a high schooler. Like, that's nonsense.
Yeah. Once again, though,
and also
this movie has no time.
Also,
for
he's
that.
a doctor, so like,
that's what I was about to say. He's a fucking physician. He understands how paperwork fucking goes.
Yeah, but he has no bedside
he also
manner.
knows that you gotta inform the patient of what the procedure is. You know? So.
Yeah, Maybe he secretly bumped against the bureaucracy of being a physician, and this has finally freed him to be the careless monster
also,
he always wanted to be.
He's a surgeon. He's not a like I don't know too much about like how hospitals operate, but usually I don't think you're not really one-on-one having conversations with the surgeon. Like they're just the people doing the cutty bits.
That's fair.
You know?
That's fair.
Anyway, that's enough about Doctor Strange's motivations.
Yeah.
The spell goes wrong, and Doctor Strange is like, "Oh, gotta contain this spell," and like he like traps the spell in a little box, and he's like, "Listen, if I didn't stop this spell, the multiverse would have gone fucky, and we don't want the multiverse to go fucky, man."
Hey guys, guess what happened? Hey, can you guess what happened? The multiverse gone fucky. It went fucky.
Just as clarification here, because this was something I don't think I totally like registered first time all the way through watching the movie, is that the first time they were casting the spell, they weren't making people forget that Peter Parker existed. They were just making people forget that he was Spider-Man.
No, they were
right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's not like the Avengers
yes.
would have, in Doctor Strange's defense, I guess, it's not like the Avengers would have forgot that Spider-Man helped. They would just forget his name. And it's not like his friends from high school would have.
It would have been easier for him to pick up the pieces.
Yeah, because like
of
basically,
this spell than what we eventually
see. Everyone who knew, already knew him and already knew who Spider-Man was. Then he could just go tell them again, like, "Hey, I'm Spider-Man."
Yeah. But this decision of Peter's, because like Doctor Strange he's about to give him what he wants, which is the anonymity back, but it comes at a cost, and Peter is not willing to pay that price. And this is like, I think, the start of the theme of the movie, and like the willingness to do what it takes. With great power comes great responsibility, and he's just like, but I kind of want to have it all. And he does have it all because all the villains appear.
Yeah, so
literally, I thought they were going to space it out. It was like in 15 minutes, we get Doc Ock and Goblin on the highway.
Sandman, Electro, and
And if it's not clear by now, all these villains are from the two previous theatrical iterations of Spider-Man that we've gotten, the Tobey Maguire one and the Andrew Garfield one. Like, all of the villains are straight ripped out of those movies.
And for the sake of time and interest, I think getting into the nitty-gritty of like each person's introduction and like explanation of their circumstances a little much, but I would like to discuss as we go through this how we think each villain is handled in here, because they do some interesting things right off the rip. I laughed very hard when the nanosuit took over Doc Ock's tentacles. That gave me a big chuckle that he could fucking Bluetooth pair Doc Ock's tentacles to his watch. Yeah. I thought that,
which is like,
that was goofy. I enjoyed that a lot.
Why did Doc Ock even make it something that could be done like that? Because like those tentacles were meant to stop a sun from doing sun shit.
Well, it was. I think what was happening was it was the nanites from his Tony Stark suit that he was controlling, and they wrapped around the tentacles. It looks like the tentacles are about to get an Iron Man upgrade, but it's basically like he hijacked them,
so
essentially.
like, Peter tries going to, and it missions officer or something like that, someone from MIT to like plead the case of, hey, let MJ and Ned go to MIT. They have no fault with me being Spider-Man. And while he's on...
Even though in the beginning of the movie, the FBI agent does immediately pin Ned as an egotistical accomplice of Spider-Man.
And while they're on the bridge, Spidey gets attacked by Doc Ock. They'll have a back and forth and stuff. And, when that fight ends with Spider-Man taking over Doc Ock's tentacles and, like, subduing him, Green Goblin comes in with, like...
And he's throwing that weird pumpkin bomb.
Did Willem Dafoe already break the mask of the Green Goblin yet, or
no? That happens after.
No. This is at this point we just see him fly up, and as he's about to attack Peter, Doctor Strange swooshes him away and sets him up with the magic teleportation gauntlet that will trap everybody in the basement.
And Doc Ock already had the lizard trapped in one of the magic cage thingies.
You mean?
Oh, yeah. He was like, hey, yeah.
Not Doc Ock, Doctor Strange, you mean?
Doctor Strange. I meant Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Yeah.
Too many
Doctor
doctors.
Strange. Yeah, Doctor Strange had already captured the lizard. Beloved villain, the lizard from 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man. I mean, hey, okay, so I don't think there's a whole lot to discuss about the lizard in this. I think is maybe the least.
He's the least present,
villains that's brought
the
up
lizard's
here.
just there to like pat out the cast. It's fine. Not every villain needs to be focused on. Sometimes you just need a job.
Agreed.
And that's
absolutely
fine.
agreed. Yeah, and I think that the lizard and Sandman absolutely play that role.
Well, Sandman at least got a little. Sandman got at least a little bit of something,
Yeah.
That's true. I think it's just that the lizard, even in the 2012 The Amazing Spider-Man, was always kind of one-track mind anyway. He wasn't a very interesting villain because he was just like, I don't have an arm, but I can give myself an arm. Oh, wait, being a lizard's fucking dope. Y'all should try this, huh? Like, that's... it didn't go beyond beyond, like, literally the mad scientist idea. At least the Green Goblin in the 2002 movie was like... He had that same mania, but that was just half of the character that we saw. And there was intrigue there. And Lizard is just like, nah.
Oh, man,
cool.
I want to talk about how they handled Green Goblin, because I think there's some great stuff there.
We will get there. I want to hear your thoughts.
Doctor Strange is like, okay, so you know how I said the multiverse was going to get fucky if I didn't contain the spell? Well, things got a little bit fucky, because some people managed to ink into our universe. And all these people are people who knew the identity of Spider-Man, Peter Parker, in their universes. Hey, Doc Ock, do you know Spider-Man? Yeah. Do you know his secret identity is Peter Parker? Yeah. Is that Peter Parker? No. And it's a very elegant way of explaining multiverse.
Yeah, I think for the amount of multi-layered complexity here on both like a diegetic and meta level, this movie fucking flies and handles those bits of exposition really quickly and really effectively.
One of the real strengths of
it's kind of surprising.
It's really impressive, like this movie and Into the Spider-Verse, like how they handle like multiversal, universal shenanigans, and how they and superhero and supervillain, just weirdness with a lot of elegance and a lot of simplicity. Like, why do all these guys have power? Do we need to know their backstory? No, they're supervillains. Yeah. It's fine.
I mean, it really, what these two movies really do is they, instead of trying to explain this stuff as information, they do what most good film writing does, which is ground everything in a character's journey and perspective. Every time that they're explaining something about the multiverse, it's relative to the experience of the characters being affected by it, and not just saying, here are all the rules, now remember them, because we have 2 hours left in this movie.
Yeah, and it's very like, like they're just kind of matter of fact with the fact that this is happening, because like, the concept of the...
In the way that, like, an episode of Star Trek would be like, what are all the different possibilities we should consider for... Like, it's not trying to philosophize. It's just like, we're in it, we're doing it, let's go.
I like how they're very matter of fact about the multiverse stuff, because basically, like, most people who have seen like sci-fi adjacent things are at least vaguely familiar with the concept in the multiverse, right? And you don't really need to, like you said, you don't really need to jump into explaining all of the rules. You can let the audience figure out what the rules are just based on what's actually happening, you know? Because so it's not, they're like, you know, some multiverse stuff, they would have like 10 versions of what's his face, of Tom Holland running around, right? And like they did a bit of that in Loki, where there was, you know, they already established in Loki that like in the other universes there would be different actors playing the same character, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, you get the idea, right? Like you already notionally understood that, you know, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was not in the same universe as Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Now it's just those are in the same multiverse. So it's like, you know, I agree with you. I like the way that it's just like, there they are, you know, you understand what's happening here.
Yeah. I didn't even think much about Loki during this, but you're right. That like fully primes all the mechanics for this.
Yeah,
it's
but
like
like
that...
not everyone. It'd be weird to expect everyone to have watched Loki before.
No, for sure. But...
Yeah, I'm just commenting on the synergy. Like that was thoughtful and intentional. Somebody had to sit down and look at this movie script and this TV script and be like, all right, well, let's make sure
it's almost
these
like
line
they
up. Honestly, I'm jealous of whoever's
it's
job
almost
that
like
is.
they
That
have a
sounds
whole
great.
ass guy who's supposed to be doing that. But yeah, no, because like that's something that I was questioning more while watching Loki, because I was just like, okay, wait, but this isn't the same, like, because like the, you know, it was like we don't need to get into that because that's more of a discussion on Loki. But basically the kind of thing that gets set up here, just to kind of move us through the plot a little bit more, right, is you know, they meet all of their other villains. He goes and captures the, you know, Electro from the Andrew Garfield movie and Sandman from the Tobey Maguire movies, and then Willem Dafoe kind of comes in and surrenders himself. He breaks the mask because, you know, it's setting up this whole Jekyll and Hyde, it's continuing to set up this whole Jekyll and Hyde thing with with I guess we should call him Norman, not Willem Dafoe, but you know,
Norman Osborn.
Yeah.
So
but Willem Dafoe really does that character.
I was really surprised at how effective this was too, because all we see on the bridge scene where we meet Doc Ock is we see Goblin fly in, and then we cut away to the wizard's basement with Doctor Strange, and then the next shot we see of Goblin is him taking his suit off, breaking the mask, and like you hear the two voices in his head. And if you've watched the 2002 movie, you understand that like it's like a dissociative identity. It's a split personality thing. And here they set it up just by like having two lines of voiceover and a creepy laugh as Norman runs away. And I was thinking to myself, does this make any goddamn sense to someone that has not seen it? Fortunately, I went with someone who has not seen any of the previous 5 Spider-Man movies. And she was like, that fucking ripped ass. That was awesome.
Yeah, real quick though, like
I did, but I was not that like, can you look at it and make sense of it? But I'm like, when you're flying through it and you get only 10 seconds of this character and then the rest of the movie with them, like, does it jive? It felt so rushed to me because I know the multitudes of this character, but it's just everything fucking worked for me and for someone who had seen none of it. I was
real quick
very impressed.
In like the league of actors with like smooth or very like pleasing voices to hear, you know, your Morgan Freemans or your I think we should probably put Willem Dafoe in there, because like there is something like good about hearing Willem Dafoe's voice.
His voice is charming.
Well,
and intoxicating.
He's very good at voice work, but the reason why you wouldn't put him in the same category as like fucking Morgan Freeman is because you want Willem Dafoe to be reading like your fucking Halloween special, whereas you want Morgan Freeman to be reading a nature document. You know, it's like it's a different kind of.
I don't know, man.
You know, it's like he's got a very
I could listen
like
to
an attractively creepy voice, I would say.
He does when he does creepy, but like, man, I could listen to a nature documentary with him doing that, you know, I'm something of a scientist myself type. That is absolutely Morgan Freeman vibes. If he carried that through a fucking March of the Penguins 4, I'd watch it.
I thought that, you know, I felt kind of stupid for being surprised by this afterwards, because like, you know, he's a really good actor, but it kind of caught me off guard just like how incredibly good he is in this movie, because like he plays the same character very consistently, but there's just that little bit of
there's a lot of added depth. Yeah, there's a lot of added depth to the character, where in the first Spider-Man movie you could see elements of it, but here it's more emphasized that this is a person who needs help. This is a mentally ill person who needs help. Like that scene where he's at Aunt May's what was it?
Shoving donuts in his pockets.
Shoving donuts in his pockets?
Yeah, he was shoving donuts in his pockets.
I didn't see that.
He was absolutely shoving donuts in his pockets.
I didn't see that, but like Aunt May's, what was it, food kitchen or
soup kitchen?
Soup kitchen, yeah. When he was at Aunt May's soup kitchen, like there's like this very sympathetic character there, where it's like you do genuinely feel for him and feel for like the situation he's found himself in.
It was just really. Like, it was just,
I'm not gonna lie.
It was really interesting to me that he basically, you know, he's very clearly playing the same character, but it's almost like in the character and like the situation, there's just a complete tonal shift between how he was in the Tobey Maguire movies because of what those movies were, and how he is in these movies because of what they are. You know, because it's like all the core elements. I think you're right. But he was more of a one-note kind of just crazy person in the Tobey Maguire movies, because those movies were very like stylized superhero, like comic booky, and the MCU, you know, aside from having a bunch of ridiculous stuff,
they feel much more grounded.
It has much more of this grounded thing where it's like actually exploring the pathos
from a performance standpoint.
I mean, just like even just like the tone of his voice, you know, it's just like, I mean, you know, obviously he's a lot older now, so he's not going to act exactly the same, but you know, he's just like, there's a lot of like I don't know, like more nuance in his voice, whereas in the original ones, it's like every time he said a line, you're like, oh, that's a crazy person just waiting to jump out of his skin, you know?
No, I completely agree. The subtlety, I'm not gonna lie, in this moment in the soup kitchen, I believed fully like, oh cool, Green Goblin's gone, maybe we'll get like Harry's Goblin or something, because I was just so roped into his performance. But this is also the point in the movie where they get all the villains together, they sort of piece together their relationships to each other.
Off what you just said before we get into what were you going to say?
Go ahead.
So like for me, it's like I see how they were going with the character, because not so much the Green Goblin's gone, but like he is like the metaphor of like the mentally ill person who needs help. Like when he's like saying I went to my home and there was another person there, and my son, I don't know where he is, and like there's just sort of frantic energy to it, where he's like
he seemed legitimately like he was channeling like the performance of a dementia patient in a way that like didn't feel reductive or pandering in the way that it felt like blown up, like Jeff was saying in the Tobey movies. Like this felt like he was playing that kind of character earnestly, and like I said, it roped me in.
And I'm staying on that point because, like, oh man, it's a really good character, really good performance that was there.
Yeah. So I think that this is the point in the movie where all the villains come together and where things start to turn. So this is where I think we can start more easily comparing characters as well. Essentially, they realize they're all from different universes, and they see their relationships. And Doctor Strange
really.
says, "Hey,
of all the multiverses in the universe,
got to go back
we took two, and they all know each other.
We got two. Yes." But then Doctor Strange is like, we're sending you back, only for them to realize that if they go back, because they watched all the other movies, these bitches are going to die.
Not
and Peter's like,
that.
I can't... like, hey, man, we can't just fucking kill all 5 of these well-cast villains.
4.
Are you kidding me?
4. Sandman
4?
does not die. We're sending him back. He's fine.
That's... Yes. That's true. That's actually very much part of his whole deal. But then eventually there's an incredible scene visually where Doctor Strange and Peter
and, that's such a cool fight because like you see like Spider-Man going up against a superhero who's way above his weight class power-wise.
Yeah.
And it's, like, so cool to, like, one, see the visual spectacle of like, Doctor Strange using all his powers against Peter, like, how he used the portal to, like, get Peter to grab himself with his
that was cool.
web.
Yeah. Everybody who's played Portal just, like, watched him fall infinitely and was like, oh, come on, you idiot. You know how to get out of this one.
And, like, but also, like, the way he beats Doctor Strange is great, because, like, he outsmarts him, as it were. He realizes the mirror dimension works on, like, geometry, and he's like, oh shit, I love math, and, like, does some, like, science nerd shit, and it's a great moment. It's a great moment where, like, Spider-Man kind of believably beats someone way above his power level, as it were.
Yeah.
I agree. It much more believable than, like, you know, when Batman vs. Superman came out and we were like, how is Batman going to beat Superman? And it turns out the answer is Martha. That wasn't a good answer. Math is much better.
No, that's how Superman beat Batman.
That's fair. Yeah, that's true.
Like they killed the cheap way out where it's
oh
yeah, he just hits him with the kryptonite right off the bat.
Well,
so
that's the way to do it, to be fair.
Yeah, but, like, come on. When you have Batman...
Guys, we can't relitigate Batman versus Superman.
When you have Batman versus Superman,
much.
there are a
Chowder,
lot of...
you're so hot.
I'm sorry, the dude with 50 different visions versus a guy with stealth, and you have a wrestling match.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, that's why that's a bad movie, and this I think is a much better one. So Peter leaves Doctor Strange. Yeah. So the mirror dimension where this fight happened, and Spider-Man says, "Hey, I'm gonna leave you here until the end of the movie. Bye," and then he fucks off.
Which
with
is
the
a
kill
nice
box.
way to kick Doctor Strange out of this movie for a little while to make it more of a, Spider-Man movie where he's not. Where he's not
adventure.
Being chaperoned by a father figure of sorts, who I guess he's not really, but he's kind of replacing
he
Tony
could have
Stark.
been, but they decide to avoid that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think a really interesting writing decision is that Spider-Man has a solve all your problems button right there. Like, he can press it anytime, and all his problems are solved, and, like, the story makes it so that like you get why he doesn't want to press the Deus Ex Machina button, as it were.
Yeah.
Because of the because of the superhero trolley problem he's running into. And I think that's a great thing, because it's such a quintessential Spider-Man thing where it's like, you can save the multiverse, but their deaths are on your hands, and it's a very Spider-Man thing to be like, no, I'm going to find a way to save everyone, even at great cost.
It's nice because like they don't bring that up a lot in the MCU. Like, most of the heroes in the MCU are just totally chill with murder, and it's not presented as like a horrible thing. It's like Iron Man 1, they set up the stakes right out of the bat is, he's gonna shoot down the terrorists because they're threatening people's lives, right? And it's like, they're presented more like soldiers in a sort of way, the only other instances right way is Daredevil, right, in the Netflix show, has a thing with murder. What was the other one?
Eternals.
I haven't seen it yet.
Eternals is Eternals is explicitly about people, like, it's a similar concept of people that could just sort of like do everything all the time, but they can't seem to get in line about what is the right thing to do.
I guess I was more thinking
and I think that this is a much more
I guess I was thinking more specifically about the are we okay with killing kind of dilemma, because that's not brought up a lot.
That is
in the Eternals too.
That's absolutely part of
fair.
Eternals. Yeah, for sure. But I think I think Eternals has a bigger discussion about it. I think this one is more
this
fun
one's more
because
personal.
It's also Peter's. Yeah, it's also Peter's fault. Peter did this, and now he's responsible for it in a way. And like this moment where he decides not to kill these guys and brings them back to his apartment to try to cure them all. Like, this is the moment where he decides, hey, maybe I can't have my cake and eat it too, so I'm just gonna fucking try to help him. He's still holding on to that idea, but he's at least
love
trying.
that about it. It's like Spider-Man. Yeah, he's a good guy who's gonna try to help everyone and like help heal these supervillains so that they can live regular lives, and that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
It's a very Spider-Man thing.
And
So-
it's also nice because, like, you know, it's not like the movie doesn't have big stakes because it's like the whole multiverse might erupt or whatever, but it does bring, like, the core stakes in the movie down to something very personal, you know? Which I
like,
think
the problem
is something that
Yeah.
the MCU, I mean, it doesn't always do it perfectly, but it's good at doing. Like, the other big example of this that I can think of was, like, our fucking first movie right after Infinity War, where half the population went away. Like, though it didn't happen chronologically after Infinity War, was Ant-Man and the Wasp, which successfully
Ant-Man and the
made you
Wasp?
care
Yeah.
about the stakes, which were a single person's life who had been assumed dead for like 20 years. And it's like, you know, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
about the bit, you know, it can be personal stakes. It can be,
you
know,
don't gotta save
Yeah.
the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like here's the thing about Spider-Man stories. The best Spider-Man stories are like inversely proportional
to the
like
stakes,
the
yeah.
scale of the story, you know, like Spider-Man versus McUniverse, the Universe Eater. Whatever. Spider-Man helping an old
and, like-
lady get her groceries home. Oh man, moving commentary.
Which
on
is
human.
what is again elegant about this movie is that for all the multiversal stakes that are happening here, it's happening because Peter wants to keep his girlfriend and his friend and his aunt. Like that is the crux
and
of it
wants
all.
to
And that is what
and
leads
wants to save
to...
these people, you know. It's like those are really the stakes.
Well,
is their
but
lives,
what
you
I'm saying
know?
is this
Yeah,
is a
for
symptom of
sure.
that. The inciting incident is everything revolves around this core point, and it begins and ends with him wanting to save this and having to make the decision about those relationships. Anyway, so for the sake of time, we're at the point where all the villains are in Peter's apartment. He's trying to cure them one by one, and I think this is where we can finally start to like really discuss the villains and their motivations. So I don't know if we want to go around the table or just talk about the interesting ones, but our 5 villains that we have are Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, Doc
Otto
Ock,
Octavius.
Electro, yes, Otto Octavius, Doc Ock, Electro, Sandman /
Yeah, I can't remember Electro's name. It's Max something, right?
yeah, it's Max something, and then the Lizard, which is Dr. Kurt Connors. So those are the 5 villains. I think we've discussed Norman Osborn a bit. Doc Ock had a lot to do, but I don't think had an interesting conflict, and I think that's just a symptom of what his villain is, which is he got overrun by the AI of his own mechanical arms.
And also,
but then we get to see his humanity come back when they are deactivated by Peter.
And also it should be noted that in Spider-Man 2, we already saw a full trajectory of his character, where with Norman Osborn, that got cut short by his death. So in the original movies they come from. So like where Doc Ock, it's really more just about the catharsis of like seeing him avert death and like seeing his like redemption.
I agree.
Stick. Osborn,
it felt like of all 5 villains, I feel like all 4 of them besides Doc Ock had their own stakes in this movie and played to their stakes very well. Doc Ock was the only one that felt like he was playing primarily to his original appearance, because Spider-Man 2 prior to like this and Spider-Verse are like the most beloved Spider-Man movie. It's one of the highest rated, and Doc Ock is widely regarded as one of the best villains. So it kind of felt like they were like, well, we can't improve upon this, so let's just use the things we know work well with him. And he didn't feel like he grew further. But I also didn't feel like that was a bad.
It's fine to have like flat. It's fine to have flat characters. That's fine. Anyway, so
but Electro.
Is yeah, go on, Colin. Sorry.
Oh no, I was prompting you guys because I was a big fan of Electro. I want to hear your thoughts.
They did a lot of interesting things in the movie. He originates from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. There's a weird disconnect where it's like, oh hey, it's nerdy dude, he seems affable, and then the moment he gets his superpowers, he goes full supervillain. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
They get the chance to rectify that weirdness by going, okay, this is a character who feels like he's insignificant, and when given the powers, he wants to feel significant.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to be, this is a nerd trying to play the alpha male, the quote-unquote alpha male, and, you know, part of his arc as a character is And spoiler for the near ending is when he talks to the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man's like, no, you're a great guy, man. You don't gotta be like a super electric villain to be good. I respect you. And he's like, thanks, man, or something that.
I think one of the best things they did with Electro in this movie was they said, "Hey, Jamie Foxx,
just do what you're good at.
Be yourself. Just do what you want to do. Read the words that we wrote, sorta, but just you're Jamie Foxx in this one. Don't worry about the last one." And I think Electro is one of my favorite parts of this movie because he did feel like he had the strongest personal motivation out of the villains. Sandman could have, but he's not really utilized to that extent. But Electro is just like, I like this. I like this power, and I really love the subtlety of, like, this universe runs on clean energy because of the arc reactor from the Iron Man movies and stuff. And he's like, nom, 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 I want to eat all this power. And it was just, again, strength building on the MCU, super subtle, but, like, informed a meaningful character choice in writing Electro that made him feel distinct, but also not like a betrayal of what came before. Granted, I don't think there's anything wrong with betraying the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
A really clever way
movie.
to just redesign his character, you know, being like, okay, he's taken some different energy. This is how he looks in this one. Now we can, you know.
He's gonna be yellow now.
And it's like, because he's definitely, out of the 5 of them, by far the one who's changed the most. And, you know, for the better, because, like, the Amazing Spider-Man was like, Sandman also came from a bad movie, but he was the best part of that bad movie, so they didn't really have to change him that much. He was the one that felt the weirdest in there because, like, compared to the other villains, right? Like, A, he didn't die in his movie. B, he left on totally good terms with Spider-Man, right? And it's like, so like, which I'm glad that they addressed that, is like, when he shows up, he's like helping him fight Electro, and he's like, hey, what's going on here? How can I help? You know? And then the minute that he turns on him is when he thinks that this alternate universe Peter Parker just straight up kills Electro, and then he's like, yo, what did we just talk about like 10 minutes ago?
Well,
like, this whole murder thing, how I killed your uncle, what are we doing here?
And I understand that this movie does not have the time for Sandman, but in this case, it was a little heartbreaking because, like, the problem with the original Spider-Man 3 where he appeared, it was just like, I think we know that from a producing side, what happened was Sandman was one of the intended main villains, and then the producers were like, but we got to have Venom, and things got sort of overwrought from there. In this movie, clearly Sandman was not the focus, but I like that all these other villains were concerned about, like, how they're going to survive, and Sandman is literally just like, I just want to get home, so can you, like, hurry the fuck up, please? Like, that was interesting to me, and we got, like, 2 lines about it, which is,
I think they do a good job in leaning, like, if we go on D&D terms, Sandman's your, like, true neutral or true neutral type of character, or maybe chaotic neutral type of character who's like, I'm not really on either side, I just have my own interests to look out for, so.
Yeah. And like
and as soon as he realizes nobody is working for him or working in his interests, he's like, okay, fuck all this.
You know,
I'm gone.
I was
Bye.
kind of like questioning his motivation for a while too, right? Because, like, you know, it made sense. It's like, okay, that's a good way to get Sandman to turn on him, is that he thinks that Peter Parker abandoned his morals and that he can't trust him, so he's going to turn on him. Because we already know that, like, you know, Sandman's main character flaw, right, is that he's kind of brash, right? And he just kind of, like, reacts to things. And that felt consistent in this. And then I was sort of questioning, like, in the final fight, I'm just like, what are you doing? And then there was some line about, like, you know, he's thinking that this spell that they're about to do is going to kill all of them. And I'm like, that's fair. He's fighting for his life. That's not the reality of the situation, because you would be fine. You're just being sent home. But I understand that, like, you don't really think things through, and you're just kind of going in fight or flight mode and trying to defend your life. You know, it's like, that makes more or less sense. That's a good way of doing it. The only thing that I thought was kind of weird about Sandman was, and this is, like, just a visual thing, is, like, in Spider-Man 3, he was not a puff of sand all the time. He went back and forth between his human and sand form, but I don't know why they just had him
I believe that
seeing a particle effect the whole
because
time.
they had Thomas Hayden Church come back as voiceover, just as Rhys Ifans did for Lizard. I do not believe they used any new footage or shooting with those characters. Probably a scheduling thing, but the footage we do see of them in the end, I believe, is archive footage from Spider-Man 3
That
and
makes
The Amazing
sense.
Spider-Man.
He's a little bit of headcanon that I'm fully aware is not supported by the actual text. But in the comics, Sandman, like the thing that turns Sandman into Sandman, is also what kills him. Like he can't, like eventually his body breaks down. He just turns to sand and fades away. And that is and you know, there's like a very moving like couple of.
Oh, so you think that he like thinks this is a terminal condition being?
Yeah, like he.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'm gonna say this leaves us with one villain, the Lizard.
Those are just kind of there.
He's just
honestly
there
not
pat it out.
Not much. Like literally, when they all go up to the apartment to do the cures, they're just like, "Oh yeah, he wanted to stay in the truck."
Fucking well, I mean,
the Lizard
let's
is
be
just
honest.
in a fucking U-Haul
the Lizard
downstairs.
is there so that they could have 5 people without bringing in the Rhino or Venom from Spider-Man 3 or New Goblin, because we definitely can't fucking bring bring James Franco into this.
No, that was not a good time for James Franco. Okay, so this is where the turn happens, and we got to sort of blaze past this just a little bit. But basically, Spidey senses tingle once again, signaling a new villain. And Green Goblin is back. The mania strikes and Willem Dafoe goes full crazy. And it is a pretty brutal fight that scatters all the villains, thrusts Peter down through, I don't know how many floors of the building for him to maybe have broken a rib.
Dude, here's the thing. Dude, like, fucking powerbombed Peter through like, 7 floors, I think?
Yeah, dude.
Like that.
Yeah.
Hey, let's not forget that this Peter Parker got an entire fucking building collapsed on him in his first movie, and then like lifted a giant piece of concrete and rebar. Like he's strong. Like he's very strong.
By doing a push-up.
You know,
that's true.
He's got those spider strength.
And then, well, he goes. I really like the dialogue in this fight scene. I also read that Willem Dafoe signed out of the movie with the condition that he would get to do the action scenes and do a lot of physical action. Cool. He's in his 60s, and that is what he's gunning for, and he does a lot of his own fighting in this movie, and the fighting in this movie is a lot more brutal and visceral than the last couple. It's no Captain America, it's no Jason Bourne.
No, that power bomb I mentioned earlier, you really feel the head. It's like, ooh.
Yeah, and his dialogue should be like super cheesy and quippy, but like he's throwing Spider-Man around, and he says in the Goblin voice, it's like, you know, you're smart enough to know what you want, like, but you're too weak to take it. And those lines like spoke to the theme of the movie and sounded so creepy out of his voice. And we're surrounded by visceral fighting. And I'm like, this is not the most elaborate or complicated fight scene in this movie, but it fucking slaps.
Okay,
really good.
And like another great thing about Willem Dafoe, you can just like look at his face and just be like, and like just see the shift.
He goes full Jim Carrey.
Like you can see the shift from Norman Osborn to Green Goblin. It's great, man.
Yeah. No, he really by and large makes this movie work.
That was something I was thinking, like, hey, who is the main villain? Yeah. And like he doesn't get the most screen time, but
it's great too because it's like they basically, you know, they set him up as the main villain, and it's simple, and it's just because he's the most threatening. Like he is, you know, like not just power set, but like cunning, and you know, like he's able to, because like there's some implication, right, that like, you know, that he's sort of steering Norman Osborn to do things, like, so, you know, he's kind of setting up the situation too. Like he wasn't, like Norman Osborn wasn't faking the whole time, but it's clear, like he says some line is like, oh, you know, it's like I've been kind of waiting for just the right time to come out.
He's been watching from behind Norman's cowardly eyes.
It's just anyway, to push forward.
No,
we could sit here and talk for like an hour about how great Willem Dafoe is. We all know it, but
and we have.
But to push the plot forward, a few things are kind of happening at once, right? We get our fight with Willem Dafoe, and eventually, like I don't know if this is exactly the same scene, but eventually it leads to Aunt May being involved, and
this is this is the climax of the Willem
And
Dafoe.
basically what ends up happening is Willem Dafoe ends up like fatally wounding Aunt May, and she doesn't really realize it yet. And then her and Peter have this scene where they're having this whole conversation about like, you know, like this was the right thing to do because you have to save people's lives. And then they bring up the iconic "with great power comes great responsibility" line, because she's basically saying like, no,
with a little twist, with great power there must come great responsibility.
Which is more...
And I think that subtle tweak is effective and important.
So fun fact, there must come with great power there must come great responsibility is a lot closer to the original line said in Spider-Man the very first ish of Spider-Man story ever told.
Yeah.
So like, good job. Did your homework there.
And I just like it too because it's like
it's
not like this concept hasn't been hinted at for the MCU Spider-Man before, because in Civil War, when we get our introduction to Peter Parker, right, he basically says something along the lines to Tony Stark. He says like, well, if the bad people come and do bad things and I had the ability to stop them and I don't, it's kind of on me, which is the exact same sentiment. They were just avoiding saying that because they didn't want to retread the exact same line. Yeah. But now that we're having a movie where that dude is literally in the movie, we can retread that ground all we fucking want. And it just feeds into the whole gimmick of the movie, which is like this, you know, it's got this whole element of this nostalgia burst of seeing all these beloved characters from previous movies. But it also fits.
Like a lot of things come at a great cost, as it were. And in this case, Aunt May basically plays the role of Peter's Uncle Ben. And, you know, we get a really heart-wrenching scene where he's just, like, trying to help Aunt May. And,
like, once again,
Tom Holland. Great
Tom
actor.
Holland, just like the end of Infinity War with I don't want to go, like, he is a champion of these fucking
he fucking
scenes.
wrings you like a wet towel, just like
Yep.
You just don't want to see. Yeah.
Meanwhile, over with Zendaya, they have
we don't mention.
Ned and MJ have been hanging on to the kill box, and they're like, should we push the button? Like they're the fail safe. Like if they push it, everyone disappears.
Yeah,
but they
and
haven't gotten the message
really
from
mentioned...
Peter. And Ned, whose magical abilities have been hinted at up to this point in the movie, stole Doctor Strange's sling ring, and is like, they realize he can use it to create a portal, and he accidentallys one Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker into his apartment. While trying to get Tom Holland.
I remember being in the theater and like people were cheering. Even I was cheering, and I'm like,
I was next to you. I'm fully aware of how loudly you were cheering.
And I'm like, I didn't even care for his movies, but shit, just seeing Andrew Garfield there, I was just filled with something. I'm like, yeah. And of course, when they after some really funny scenes and him interacting with them, they open the portal again, and we see Tobey Maguire, and I'm fucking ecstatic because like that was the Spider-Man I grew up with. I grew up with his Spider-Man movies as a kid, so like, holy shit, I lost my mind there.
And now, I'm very frequently outspoken against nostalgia as a driving factor for most things. Nostalgia plays a huge part in the enjoyment of these scenes, but I think as we're going to go through what these other Peters are doing, I think, once again, the script is very deft in using these characters to their strengths, because not only are they hilarious here, they, I think, are very strong throughout. Because Tom Holland Peter is in bad shape. Yeah,
because he just was basically responsible by his actions for killing his aunt, you know. And they basically they bring on the other Peters. They finally find him, and then they get to have this like 3-person talk of like, hey man, we went through the exact same thing. And then we get to bring back like the most, you know, like heartbreaking parts of both those movies. We get to relive, it's not we get a fucking flashback or anything, but you know, we get to relive the Gwen Stacy death. We get to relive the original Uncle Ben's death from Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. And they're just like basically, you know, empathizing with him, and it's a very sweet way to bring up those those character moments and have it be like these were the consequences that you didn't see because we stopped watching those movies after a couple of movies, because it's like these guys have grown up a little bit since that time, and we get to hear about Andrew Garfield is like, well, I stopped pulling my punches, and it's like he kind of went down a dark path, and it's like, that's believable. We didn't really see the full consequences of him dealing with Gwen's death because that movie was really bad and no one wanted a third one.
yeah, exactly. And I think a really smart decision they made is with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is that this is an older Spider-Man. This is not the Spider-Man and from the movies where he's like 22 or 20 something. This is like a very much whatever age Tobey Maguire is. This is the Peter Parker, and
no, it was
he gets to just kind of take on a sort of big brother, big mentor role to the other two, and it's really good. And what you said about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, how he said he stopped pulling his punches in the original Amazing Spider-Man. A big flaw was after Gwen Stacy died, we get a montage of him moping around, and then he picks himself up and he's like, yeah, and then fights the Rhino, and everything's back together. But here they managed to instill some depth in the sense that no, he didn't. He wasn't completely over it. He still was hurting, and he went down a dark path that Tom Holland might go down.
Yeah.
So I want to ask both of you a question, because I think we've talked about how the Green Goblin is an evolution of the character in this movie compared to the original, how Doc Ock is kind of a continuation, but how Electro is almost like a correction. And I feel like of the if we had to, love me some Toby, but I think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man got a lot more meat in this. And how do the Andrew Garfield Peter Parker and Electro slap so hard here because those movies were lackluster to the point where we just wanted a better version and we finally got it? Or are they just legitimately that much better than other components of this movie?
No, I think what helps them is that they, corrected for the flaws of their movies, so that definitely helps them. And part of it is the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is by this point so old that he's kind of gone through his arc, whether you want to interpret it as on-screen or off-screen. He's already been there and done that. He is the Obi-Wan of sorts. He is just...
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because he doesn't really have a lot of growing to do here, but Tom Holland does, and Toby's Peter is the perfect guiding light for him. I think that
they use Toby in a similar way that they use Green Goblin, in that he was very good in his original movies, but they've adjusted the tone of how he acts and manages himself to fit more of the groundedness of the MCU. And you can also write that off as he's just grown up a little bit, right? But I might get a little bit of flack for saying this, but fucking Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker is the cringiest motherfucker alive.
I mean, yes, but
absolutely,
that's the point.
I know it's the point. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I've always said this is the reason that I prefer Tom Holland to Tobey Maguire is because when Tom Holland is awkward, it's oh, cute, he's awkward, and when Tobey Maguire is awkward, I want to take a fucking shower. He's they've adjusted because they play, but they comment. What I'm saying is,
I agree.
Because I'm not saying that those are bad movies. I'm just saying because of the comic booky style, everything is just a little bit more exaggerated, included but not limited to Peter Parker's awkwardness. Which when you take that and compare it to a normal person's awkwardness, you're like, ooh, you're being real weird right now in a way that is beyond just kind of
here's
awkward.
Here's the thing. Growing up with the Tobey Maguire movies and loving them a lot, I also was is this guy the best actor? As a kid, I couldn't really appreciate the nuance of playing
Yeah.
an awkward character. But I will say, awkward people in the real world are a lot more like
fair?
Tobey
Yeah.
Maguire's Peter
Yeah,
than
no.
they are the charmy, goofing, I want to marry you Tom Holland one. Like, when Tom Holland's awkward, I'm like, fucking, like, date me. But with Toby, I'm just like, stay away from me. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's what awkwardness is
awkwardness
actually
is
like.
a negative quality. Remember that. And
Yeah, no, it's
let's
not.
be real.
It ain't cute.
Let's
It's
be
horrifying.
real. In real life, Tom Holland's Peter Parker would be the popular kid. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And I think there was some criticism with the Amazing Spider-Man
He was
movies
too
that
edgy.
like Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker was too like cool, too edgy and cool and like kind of likable. Tom Holland sort of I think
Yeah.
threaded the needle
Yeah.
between those two for the sake of a performance.
But like another correction
yeah.
like they made with Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker is that, you know, that
He's
like
calmed the fuck
still
down a little bit.
Like he's still like recognizably
Mhm.
like kind of cool and like has that cool guy skater boy edge.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
also he is awkward. He is also just awkward. Like you
Yeah.
feel a little bit of that awkwardness. And
well,
it's
because
yeah.
like the biggest thing with his character is that it does feel like a more natural progression between like the way someone is in high school versus the way they are like when they grow up a little bit. Whereas
Mhm.
like him as Spider-Man, like he was just straight up obnoxious, which was like a good quality in the movie because it's like, oh, Spider-Man's supposed to be a little bit obnoxious, right? But it's like, you know, it's like obnoxious for the sake of being funny, but like and you're funny when you're obnoxious in high school. But if you grow up to continue to be that obnoxious, then you're just kind of annoying.
Yeah.
And
He at least
you're
did
right, exactly.
mature
It's
a
like
little
he
bit.
feels
Yeah.
like he's calmed
So
the fuck down.
I am
a little
going to
bit.
catapult us. I'm going to catapult
let's
us
do it.
forward once again because we are very long in the tooth here, and I need to hop off shortly. But we get a lovely scene where the three Spiders-mans, all work together to try to build out the cures. They're going to lure everyone together, lure all the villains, cure them all at once. We get two amazing scenes where Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield marvel at the
Tobey
fact
Maguire's
that
webs come out of it.
Tobey Maguire's webs come out of his body and not his
That's
web
very good.
shooters. Guys, we get actually like a 3-minute scene
Yeah.
of them just shooting the
Yeah,
shit
no,
on the new
that
Statue
was
of
a
Liberty
great
waiting for
moment.
the villains.
Like I'm all for those.
Where like they're fixing Tobey Maguire's back from Spider-Man 2, they're addressing Andrew Garfield's depression, they're asking about the biological web shooters, and Tom Holland says, "Do they come out of other places?" And I'm like, God, I could have spent
Yeah.
an hour
no,
on that Statue
was,
of Liberty,
that
the
was
three of
easily
them.
the
They are
best.
so charming and fun.
Also,
Because not only it wasn't just funny, it was like an earnest
Yeah.
exploration of like their individual mental and emotional states that like sets up
And it
the
really-
Is
resolution.
that they're just all awkward in their own way, and it's just awkward cubed. It's
Yeah.
great.
no, it really felt
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
three brothers is what it felt like, you know.
Yeah.
And it was
It
very
did.
cathartic
It did.
for these characters who all three of them, their arcs revolve around them losing everyone, and it's just like, hey, we got each other, you know.
They
like,
got
and
someone,
it
finally.
won't last, but you get to enjoy it when it lasts. And I really value the fact
To-
that they took some time to have some earnest
Yeah.
scenes where Tom Holland wasn't even there, you
Yep.
know, where it's just like, let's just take some time to like,
Yeah.
you know, we feel nostalgic, and we were wondering how
Yeah.
these characters were doing because we lived up with both of their arcs, whether it be the Tobey Maguire movies or the Andrew
Mhm.
Garfield movies. Like, let's just check in with them and let them have a conversation with each other without the, you know, the kid who is the main driving force
Yep.
in the movie being around. Like, it's valuable, you know.
And then when
Yeah.
when they're in the fight and they're all getting in each other's ways because they've never been part of
Yeah.
a team before, and then like they're about to break and go in their mission, and then Andrew Garfield says, "Hey, I love you guys," and they're both like,
Thanks.
"Ah, cool, thanks, man."
Like they
They
like
thanks.
they clearly reciprocate. They
They-
just don't know how to
so weird.
reciprocate, and it feels
because it
feels
is very awkward.
It feels very real, you know.
Yeah.
Like they reciprocate, but they don't know how to reciprocate. Yeah, but
So there are like 3 major resolutions in this final fight where all the villains show up. The first is they issue the cure on pretty much everyone. We get little asides with each Spider-Man and their biggest villain that felt really nice to just see like, "Hey, Otto, how you doing? Hey, Max,
Yeah.
how
No,
you
no,
doing?"
I
And then Max says, "Ah, man, I thought you were going to be black."
yeah.
Funny.
Okay, small nitpick about that moment. I've already told you guys, but we're recording now. So, you know, he runs through his logic, like, you help the poor, you wear a mask, and you're from Queens.
You're from
and
Queens.
Like, one out of those three don't work as logic, because, like, Queens is known for its Asian and Hispanic communities, not the black communities. I mean, there obviously are black people in Queens. It's just...
Yeah.
Of all the boroughs in New York, that is not one of the black majority boroughs. Even so, an endearing moment that seemed to tease the introduction of a Miles Morales down the road to these movies. And the second resolution, I say this is pretty big, is we see MJ falling.
That was
and Tom Holland goes to save her and misses, and we get an ultimate redemption for the Gwen Stacy death in Amazing Spider-Man 2 when Andrew Garfield saves MJ, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And she says, "Yes," and then he starts crying, and she's like, "Are you okay?"
That was such a sweet moment.
And guys, in the theater, I was not okay. That was, I think, maybe the most resonant moment in the movie for me. Amazing Spider-Man 2, bad movie. Gwen's death,
like the moment we saw MJ fall, we knew who was going to be the one to save her. Yeah, and it was still satisfying as hell. Like, my sister knew it, I knew it
extremely,
but like still super satisfying to see him. And I don't think redeem. I don't think redeem is the right word. I think catharsis.
Yeah, like it's like giving him his moment so that, you know, it's more like for the service of this fictional character, you know, it's like giving him his own redemption, not because his redemption to the audiences.
Yeah, well, he stated his trauma and his issues, and this, on top of the support from the other Peters, gives him the tools to move forward. Like, we see that in the very few lines we get surrounding this issue, and again, deft, efficient, smart screenwriting. The third resolution to the villains here is Norman Osborn fist fighting Tom Holland's Peter, who
before
wants
we get
to kill
into
him.
That, I would like to point out just the exchange that, so, like, you know, Doc Ock comes in and he looks like he's about to be a bad guy, but turns out he's on their side and, you know, stops Electro and stuff. And we have an exchange between his Doc Ock and Tobey Maguire, which is really wonderful. You know, like, he's holding the arc reactor in his hand and he says his iconic line, "The power of the sun." And then Tobey Maguire finishes the line, "In the palm of your hand." And it's, that's so good. And then he's like, and like, you get a moment sweet. You never got to have in Spider-Man 2 because, like, he dies in Spider-Man.
It was so urgent, and he sacrificed himself
so fast. But here we get a slow moment where he just gets to catch up with Peter, and it's just so sweet. Like, he's like, Peter,
and
he like,
I think it's worth mentioning.
Stops caring about
these slow moments.
He stops caring about the arc reactor, and he's just like, "Peter, man, it's been a while. How have you been?" And Peter's like, and he makes a callback to the first thing he ever really said, Doc Ock ever really said to Peter, and that's trying to be better. And there's a knowing smirk, and it's good. Sorry, go on, Colin. Yeah,
it is. All right, so now we're really gonna wrap this up. Tom Holland wants to kill Green Goblin, and he picks up the glider to stab him with it. And Tobey Maguire gets in the way and says, "Nuh-uh, man, don't do it. That's not Spider-Man. That's not you. Don't do it." Sorry, Chowder, we cannot stop. We're so short on time. We cannot stop here.
Yeah, we gotta push through.
He goes to Toby, gets in his way, says "nuh-uh," and that's sort of the inflection point where we see all these emotions tugging at Tom Holland's Peter Parker come to a head. And I should mention that the box that sends them all back to their universes got destroyed. So they pull Doctor Strange back from the portal, and he's like, "Hey, man, the universe is falling apart, but we took care of all the bad guys and cured them all. How do we fix everything? Can we do the spell where people forget that I'm Spider-Man?" He's like, "Nah, it's too late for that." We don't know why it's too late for that, but
you know, magic.
It is. Magic. And then Tom Holland instead says, "What if everybody forgot who I am entirely?" And that is the way they go. We see all the villains and heroes get sent back to their universe. We see the ruptures in the sky close up. There were ruptures in the sky. And Tom Holland says goodbye to his friends. And MJ says, "Hey, come find me Remind me who you are, because if you don't, I'll just figure it out again. And it's a really sweet, heartbreaking moment. But everyone forgets who he is. He goes to find her, has a speech prepared, and sees that she's living a good life. She got into MIT, but she still has the scars from the battle that she doesn't remember, and decides, I'm not going to tell her who I am.
Yeah.
He goes and moves off on his own, all by himself, and ends as a lonely, anonymous, friendly neighborhood
Which is
Spider-Man.
really sad, because by the end he's lost everyone and everything he's ever loved, and that is a really sad note to go on. And the theme is basically to do the right thing, you have to make big sacrifices, and he accomplished in saving all those villains, but in doing so he's lost everyone he's ever loved, and that is heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
Yep. And his journey has come full circle. I think we should unpack this ending in the ratings for the sake of time. But that is the summary of the movie. Hot damn, guys. I know it's late now, but I really could talk. I could talk for so many hours about how much I enjoyed this movie.
I'm sorry for dragging this
It's
on.
dense.
And this episode on a little longer, but damn.
I mean, there's a lot in this movie to unpack, and there's so many subtle things that is just hinted at, and it does a lot to kind of move things along, and it's just very there really is just a lot to break down. So, but yes, you're right. We have
it is
we
incredibly
have to be moving
dense.
on to the ratings section now. Thank you both for a very good discussion. Now we're going to be moving on to the ratings, where each of us are going to rate the topic on a scale from 1 to 10 spiders, men. That makes the most sense to me, right? Alternate universe Spider-Man.
I'm on board. I enjoy saying
Spiders-Man?
Spiders Men. Yep, I enjoy it. I vote for
Colin,
this.
we'll start off with you. How did you feel about No Way Home?
I'm a big fan of Spider-Man. As far as the movies go, always been my favorite hero to watch. So coming into this, I felt kind of the way about this that I did going into the Avengers movie in 2012, because we all saw Spider-Man 3. I saw it in theaters. They had 3 villains in that movie, and we were like, ugh, how are they going to wrangle 3 villains? They didn't. It wasn't great. And then we went into the Avengers, so how are they going to wrangle 6 heroes?
Yeah.
And it was great. So I came into this with okay, I know that this universe can do a good job with multiple characters, but I know that Spider-Man traditionally does not do well with multiple villains. I came in so confused about how this was going to shake out, and God, it works. It fucking works so well. I think that any point in this movie could be nitpicked. The logic for the magic spells bringing everyone into this universe is they all knew Peter Parker, but I'm pretty sure that Electro didn't know Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Upon too much, it's like a Chris Nolan movie. Too much scrutiny, things start to fall apart.
I know. I turned to our friend
piece
in
of
the theater, and
entertainment,
I was like, man, if the criteria are knowing Peter Parker is Spider-Man and being dead in some way, shape, or form related to Spider-Man, it's too bad that Gwen Stacy didn't end up in this universe.
And of course,
that's true.
And
that's
of course,
very true.
the end credits shows Tom Hardy's Venom in there, and it's he has nothing to do with Peter Parker. So why
and I
is
guess
he
it's
here?
just maybe because he's an alternate universe version of Eddie Brock, and some Eddie Brocks knew who is there's
you're
lots
not
of ways
too-
you could.
And
you're not too far off, because
Doctor Strange's
Venom,
language
in the Venom movies, the
Hey guys, we're still in my
Colin,
ratings.
the
continue.
symbiote does explain that it is a multiverse.
Guys,
said
we're still in my ratings.
Multiversal hive
Hey,
mind.
Chowder, we're still in my
Okay,
ratings.
I'm done. Now you may rate.
We're in my Chowder. You need to take a nap
At 9
right now. Take an Ambien at 9 p.m. So yeah, I think that all these villains are well wrangled. I feel like every character is given something to do, and the ones that are flat aren't flat in a way that's I didn't care about them. They're flat in a way that's they weren't the focus of the movie, but what they got made sense in the flow of it. And I found that for the first time in the MCU, I got the Spider-Man I wanted, because what really bugged me about Homecoming and bugged me about Far From Home is that this Peter Parker was only so good and skilled because he was supported by Iron Man. He was supported by the Avengers. He was supported by Mysterio and fake Nick Fury and all these people. And this movie is like a journey of him becoming a Spider-Man unto himself and throwing everything away and saying, I'm just going to do this myself. He makes his own suit. He goes out and flies by the Christmas tree from Hawkeye.
Yeah,
and
fucking,
like,
I've just got to say,
he
fucking making his own suit is a hugely impractical thing. Like, he already has a very technologically useful suit. He did not need to go fucking...
It got fucked up. It got fucked up in the fight, and he didn't have the tools to fix it anymore. So, I think I'm not saying this is a perfect movie, but if we're talking about my enjoyment, I enjoyed the nostalgic bits. I enjoyed the new bits. I enjoyed it as a story, and I thought the impact, like Chowder said, this is a trolley problem of Peter's creation, and his choices are so important throughout the whole movie, and those shape his character in a way that makes me want 3 more movies with this guy. 10 out of 10.
Oh.
I love this movie. I think this hits right under Into the Spider-Verse for me in terms of Spider-Man movie quality. It's great. It's super duper good. There are problems with it that you can find, but you do not feel them when you're watching it.
Chowder?
It's great.
So, spoiler alert, I pretty much agree with Colin. 10 out of 10. It is just under Spider-Verse and just how good it is, which is surprising because I was underwhelmed by Far From Home. I thought it was just I didn't think it was a bad movie, but like I didn't care for it much. I felt like it's just like one, Peter's got daddy issues with his surrogate father figure, and 2, it's like a lot of like what might make Spider-Man appealing is that he's an everyman, and until this point, MCU Peter Parker is like, he's got all these resources. He's got a billionaire father figure. He's got all these things going for him, and but here they managed to bring Spider-Man back to being that everyman, and like the writing is good. It's elegant. It manages to solve so many problems well without calling attention to itself.
Satisfactorily. Like even if you want to nitpick them, like they feel so well like constructed, edited, performed in the moment that even if they don't meet scrutiny, they feel good.
And exactly. So like, I gotta give this a 10 out of 10. One last thing I gotta say: the reason Tom Hardy's Venom is there is because Venom in his movie explains that the symbiotes are a multiversal hive mind. That's all I wanted to say.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting.
All right.
Okay. Jeff, I know you had some mixed feelings
Yeah,
compared to some
not
of us.
that
I'm
mixed.
very curious to
I'm
see where
like-
you land after
Yeah,
time to marinate.
in terms of the number of Spider-Men I want to give it, I think I'm kind of straddling between an 8 and a 9. I probably lean 9. I think you guys have kind of convinced me otherwise. I think that the things that I had problems with in this movie are a bit more reflective of just the way that the MCU is kind of shaping up. And I think that I noticed it the most when I watched Shang-Chi, whereas like Shang-Chi rather, is like I watched the movie and I enjoyed it, and then I kind of found that like it's starting to get to this point in the MCU where it's turning a bit more popcorny, in that like I'm trying to be like, okay, I gotta turn my brain off a little bit and just enjoy these for what they are. And I think that it's doing that very well, which is why I still feel very favorably about both of these movies. But, it is kind of moving away from like, like it's not like there were never any inconsistencies or things that didn't hold up in previous Marvel movies, but it's sort of feeling like there's a bit more like visible seams to that kind of stuff now, where it's just like, okay, the main thing of the plot is like, realistically, would this guy ever really just launch into the spell without fucking explaining it to him? That's insane, And it's just like, that's like a core thing of what drives the entire movie, and that's something that is just like, all right, like Colin said, it's a problem that you don't feel really hard while watching the movie, but it is kind of right there. So it's just sort of like, I have an issue with that, but it just kind of...
MJ does pay lip service to it a little bit, at least. She, calls him out on it, but, that's the only
right,
hate
exactly. And it just kind of, like I said, it doesn't ruin the movie for me, but it's a very early indication that's sort of like, okay, shut up, stop being pedantic, just turn off and watch this movie because it's a fun time. Because it's meant to be just a fun time and not be, super complex and airtight, which is fine, but, it does make me a little bit sad that the MCU is moving a bit more towards in that direction of just and some people would probably say that it's always been that way, but I guess that hasn't been my feeling directly. Mostly I think things that mostly have explained themselves for the most part, but
I would like to counter that with saying, this is also the year that we did get WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and Eternals, all of which are much more meditative takes on the MCU in one way or another. So if we're addressing the MCU holistically, I'm not going to say, this is the perfect franchise. It's got its big problems. But I think that while this is the most spectacly movie we got this year, we did get a lot of other stuff that is, meditative on
that's fair.
Ethics, race, and things in big ways that this movie does unfortunately not have the time to be. Which is a valid criticism of this movie and its place
but
in
ultimately
the MCU.
I think stuff like that would really break other movies for me in a lot of big ways, and I didn't feel that so much with this one.
Fair.
I had my issues with it while watching it, but I got to the end of the movie and I was like, that was great. I unlike Colin, I'm not really turned off by nostalgia as a motivator. I mean, I fucking collect toys that are from the 80s, and that's literally nostalgia for a period before, 10 years before I was fucking born. So, I'm big into nostalgia as a thing, but I agree with you that if it's used in too much of a gimmicky way, it can be like a crutch, and I thought that this movie handled it in just the right way. It gives you your nostalgia, but doesn't lean on it, and it doesn't, treat it as too much of a gimmick, even though the whole thing with this movie is just a big gimmicky spectacle. It, it uses it to its advantage in a lot of really smart ways, which I think is just really fantastic. So I would say 9 out of 10 for me. It's not perfect, and those things still stand out to me in some ways, but it's impressive for that this movie can make me kind of ignore those things, which usually would bother me a lot. So
I also, in the year of Black Widow, maybe not the best movie for female agency.
Fair. Well,
in a
Zendaya
Marvel
did a lot in this movie, and also granted, you're right. I mean, it wouldn't have been the movie to do that because we have to have fucking 3 male leads who are all the same person, but it does say something that we at least got some good characterization out of Zendaya as MJ, who felt like she was a really believable character, and I, like Chowder said earlier, them giving May a more significant role to have her be someone who's actually shaping the way that Peter thinks about things, I think is really smart, and having her fill that Uncle Ben role. So yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not he fucking I hate that trope. You've kind of brought me around on it being the arc of this story, but I detest the trope of fucking oh, you want me to keep you in the loop, but I can't stand the thought of me hurting you, so I'm gonna go against your direct agency and do the exact opposite thing, and I hate that trope in superhero shit. But
also what happened in this movie is Peter Parker watched his Aunt May die because of it. So that would be like if I said, hey Jeff, can we watch movies together and also you shoot me in the face? Can we do those things together? And then I hand you the gun. You have to decide whether or not you're going to shoot me in the face, even though I asked for it, And he was just fortunate enough to not have her there to pull the trigger for him.
And to be fair, after all he's been through, I would probably just, if I just went through what he just did, I'd probably be like, give me a moment. I need to process some stuff before I make any big decisions.
It's why I appreciate It's why I appreciate the characterization of it as a trolley problem. Not to defend the trope, but I feel it felt more well earned in this case than even in Spider-Man 2002, where Tobey was like, "I can't be with you, Mary Jane." It didn't feel quite as robust in that movie as it did.
And I agree with you, which is
anyway.
why it bothers me less than it does in most instances. But it's still a thing where it's just like that, like my experience watching the movie. I got out of the movie and I'm like, man, I really loved that movie. That fucking ending kind of sucked a little bit, though. That's how I sort of felt, you know. But anyway, that's basically my opinion on it. I think we can move on and wrap it up here. Thank you all for listening to the Common Geeking Program. Again, I've been your host, Jeff Levitt. If you want to find me, if this is something that you're into, I do a toy review YouTube channel that's called Alchemist Prime Reviews, and if not, that's fine. And again, I've been joined by Colin and Chowder. You guys have anything you want to toss out there?
Yeah, I do a lot of other stuff here at Comic Geeking Program. My name is Colin Ketchen. You can find me at SonicColinK on social media stuff. But just recently, I just did another edit for the folks over at The Greatest Discovery, which is a very, very big and successful Star Trek podcast. I got to do an edit for them. The episode I did is called Zora Could Be Tubining, discussing a very good episode of Star Trek Discovery. And I had a lot of fun doing that. So I might get to do more work with them in the future, but I did an episode with them and it was very good.
Hey, I'm Taeemul or Chowder, whichever you prefer. Before I slink off into the shadows to protect you from the dangerous life I live, you can find me on Twitter at Taeemul Chowder. I'm also part of our sister podcast, Dice Populi. We're currently doing a story arc of my making, which is really ramping up. Fun times there. And yeah, thank you for putting up with just my hyper energy. I just really like this movie.
Fair enough. Anyway, thank you all for listening, subscribing, sharing, and everything you do. I forgot to talk when our next episode is. Sorry. Our next episode of the Common Geeking Program will be a briefing program episode, which will be airing on the first Friday in... What month are we recording for? It will be airing on the first Friday in February, which will be the 4th. And then our next proper Geeking Program episode will be on the third Friday in February, which will be the 18th. And so thanks for listening, subscribing, sharing, and everything that you do, and we'll talk to you next time.
Ciao.
Derp.
Bye-bye. Derp. I'm just like primed for it at this point. I got that one
before you.
This episode of the Common Geeking Program was hosted by Jeff Levitt, featuring Taeemul Chowdhury and Colin Ketchen. With this episode edited by me, Taeemul Chowdhury. The Common Geeking Program was created by Jeff Levitt and Colin Ketchen, with music by Colin Ketchen. This episode was brought to you by Chowder's Parental Issues. What's a superhero origin without parental issues? If you would like to know more about us, go to commongeekingprogram.com. You can also find us on Twitter, at Geeking Program. If you liked what you heard, comment and share. It helps us out. And with that, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Ciao.